Hey guys, thanks for checking out my channel Maverick's Arcade. My name is Chuck. Today we're going to be talking about the emulator for the PS2. The one I'm using is called PCSX2. It's a pretty good emulator. It emulates most of the games properly. If not, there's usually just a little bit of a weird glitch like Burnout, the sky will be black. But the gameplay is still the same. Now, most other emulators, you set up the emulator, you define your video settings, you define your audio settings, you define your controllers, and then you just point to various ROMs, and they all seem to work with the same platform settings. However, the PS2 one's a little bit different. Sometimes you go into a game and it needs DirectX to work properly, and other times it needs OpenGL to work properly. Now, the game does not remember, or the emulator does not remember various settings for different games. You have to, on your own, you would have to go and manually change these settings. So what I've found the best way to do is there is a command line option for defining a configuration path. The problem is most of the front ends don't offer variables in your command line to define those options. So I have made a batch script in a folder structure that seems to work to allow you to save separate configurations for each game. Because again, the goal is when my friends and family come over to play this thing, I don't want them to have to wait for me to reconfigure each game that they want to play. I want it to work where they come over, they select their game, they hit the button, and everything works without me having to do anything. I want to enjoy my time with them playing games. I don't want to worry about whether or not the settings are correct. So what I've decided to do, and it seems to work pretty well, is we'll go to the place where I've stored the emulator, and this is in my case under the D drive, emulators PS2. And I've made two folders. I made one called configs, and I've made one called copy lilypad script. And the benefit, right now we're only going to focus on the configs. The lilypad script folder, we will get to in a moment. So go into the configs, and you can see all it is a bunch of folders with the names of some of the games. Now, where I got those names is in my ISO folder where I have all of my games. All I did was I selected and I copied the name here, not with the .iso, just the name of the game without .iso. And I go back to the configs folder and I make a folder for that option. Then what I do is I go into in my PS2 folder. I've made a batch file, which again you can pause the video here and copy the batch file out if you need to. But what it does is it takes instead of most emulators where you're launching the executable of the emulator and the front-end software knows to pass the path to the ISO file or ROM image or other types for that emulator. What this is doing is it's launchpad, where I called it launch ps2.bat. And what it's doing is it's saving that second part of the variable as string and executable. But then you can see here it's modifying the string, where in my case I have D drive emulators PS2, and then the folder where the ISOs are stored is ISO. So you can see in my string on that second line where the strings, or the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line where the strings are being adjusted, it's going to take out any instances of that string that have D : emulators PS2 and or ISO. It's going to take those out of the string. Then it's going to take off the end of the string that is .iso or .q. And then basically, the executable, it's just taking anything that says Q, it's just changing it to bin. Then it's going to change to the path. Again, this is something you'll have to change for wherever your paths have been set up, to where your launch bat file and the PCSX2 file exists. And then basically it's just going to launch PCSX2.exe full screen, and then here's a config path, and here you need to put back in the front part of that folder structure, and then the string variable to make sure that that folder name of the individual game is being entered. After that, you can see it's got executable %, which is sending that original secondary line that was sent to the batch file, and then just dumping it on the end of this line. By doing this, all this file is doing is changing, defining the configuration path variable, and this allows you again to save separate settings per game. Now the only downside is, let's say you've set up 100, 200 different games, but you decide you change controllers and you've redefined what you want the controllers to be. Now you have to go and put that in all the various separate folders that you've created. Instead, I've made another folder here. So in that copy lilypad script folder, there's a batch file or a PS PowerShell file. And let me show you that PowerShell file. Actually, before we do that, if you were going to be changing those controls, what you would want to do is launch the emulator just by itself. So you launch the emulator and you go over to the controllers and plug in settings. Now you come over to game pad or pad 1, pad 2, change all your controller settings, and then hit OK, and we'll go ahead and quit. So then you have a folder called ionize. Go in there, copy that lilypad file, just Control C, and then you take that and copy it into the file folder called copy lilypad script. So that's what this file is here. Then this create copy file, I'm going to open it up with Notepad just so it's easier to read. And what this is doing, you'll need to modify this path, D:, again, this is where I personally have defined this. And again, we're calling this raw list. This is basically so I can go back and make sure that I found everything that I wanted it to find. And then you have batch file name. And this is, again, it should be in the folder that you're making the scripts, and I call mine copy lilypad file.bat. And then the emulator config path, this is going to be just a path to the folder where all of those subfolders are that we created. This is basically just saying if it already exists, then it's going to remove the string or the file name. So if you already have a raw list text, it's going to kill it. If you already have a copy lilypad file bat, it's going to kill it. And then all this is doing is it's recursing that directory, that configs folder we created. It's recursing, looking for any instance of the name lilypad.ini. And then if it finds it, it's going to add that information to the string file name, which in this case is listed as rawlist.txt. Then what it's going to do is it's going to look at that file again and then go through each line of that file that it created, and it's going to make a batch file with the command to xcopy from our source location to each individual configuration folder that was detected. By doing this, it's going to replace that file in all of those subfolders. So if you make a change to your controllers and you've already got games set up, when you're done, all you'll have to do is copy the lilypad file into this folder, run this PowerShell, and then run this batch file. And as you can see, this batch file is just a listing of xcopy for all the subfolders. Again, the purpose of this is so that you can have a seamless transition from one game to the next, even if the settings are vastly different. Various hacks have to be enabled, various video settings, various audio settings. This allows it so that you can set it one time and not have to set it again for each individual game. Now let's look at what it looks like in my case, Launchbox. I love this software. It's amazing software. But let's see what it looks like. So normally with the emulators in Launchbox, it defines the exe file. And then it knows after the exe file to place the name of the ROM file. However, in this case, what we're doing is for the emulator, I changed the name of the executable. Instead of pointing to the exe file, it's instead pointing to my batch file, because my batch file will pick up this name break it down for the configuration path, and then the batch file itself will launch the exe with the config path defined, and then this original setting right here will be placed at the end. And again, by doing that, it allows us to have those different game settings saved. The other benefit is by having the batch file defined in the emulator itself, it allows the import process of Launchbox to be unchanged. So you're still able to import all your games, your videos, your graphics, and everything like that, and download all that information. There's no change to this process. So this is the best way I've found. If you've found other ways to get the same thing accomplished, please let me know. I'd love to hear. If you have any other questions, please email me at mavericksarcade@gmail.com. And again, thank you for watching. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click like below and leave a comment. If you have questions or suggestions, please email mavericksarcade@gmail.com. And if you're into consoles, classic gaming, or home arcades, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks again for watching.